In this video, I'm going to talk about three-point lighting, and before we get into how to do that in Maya, let's discuss what three-point lighting actually is. Now, let's work our way up to that. First of all, one-point lighting just means that there is one light in the scene, lighting everything. Problem with one-point lighting is you tend to get very, very deep shadows, and you tend to lose a lot of details because of that. Now, that could be what you're looking for. This can create a very dramatic or even spooky effect, especially depending on where you put the lights in the scene. Imagine back when you were a child holding a flashlight under your face and going, ooh! That's one-point lighting. Two-point lighting is when you have two lights in the scene. There's always going to be one primary light casting most of the light onto your object, as you can see from this one right here, while a secondary light fills in some of the shadowed areas. It is never going to be bright enough to completely wipe out the shadows from the primary light or the key light, but it does help to lighten some of the dark areas so you can see them a little bit better. Oftentimes, this is just bounce light from the environment, but you can also add in a second light entirely if you need to. And then, of course, three-point lighting, where you have the primary light, the key light, a secondary light filling in the gaps, and then a third light, which is behind the subject, which lights it up along the edge. So let's talk about how to build that up real quick. So let's say we've got a sphere in our scene. We begin with the key light. This creates most of the light, but also most of the shadows. Oftentimes, it comes from somewhere up above, either top right, top left. Doesn't really matter where it comes from. What matters is that the fill light is going to oppose the key light. If the key light is from the top right, the fill light is going to be from the bottom left. It needs to fill in the shadows left behind by the key light, and it's always, once again, going to be dimmer than the key light. It's not going to completely overwhelm and lighten up the shadows. There needs to be shadows. Otherwise, the whole thing's going to be evenly lit and flat and boring to look at. So you need to have some shadows in here, but they need to be light enough people can still see things. And what makes it a three-point lighting, once again, is that backlight. That is there to create a rim of light on the edge of your main character or primary model that you're trying to show off. You may not see this a lot in real life, except in very specific circumstances, but it is so used in Hollywood at this point that we just kind of accept it when we see it. It is there to break your subject away from the background. Without that, you risk this blending in, just looking like the rest of your scene. Throw in the backlight, and suddenly this is indicated as something that is important to look at. And that is the main reason why we have the three-point lighting. So, how do we set this up in Maya? Well, first things first, you need to decide where your camera angle is going to be. Because if I spent all my time lighting this with my key light and my secondary fill light and my rim light, backlight from this angle, and then change my mind and decide, no, I want to make the sphere in the center of the scene and everything else in the background, well, all the lights you just set up are completely useless. So you got to make sure you know where your camera is going to be. It also helps to know what the camera is going to be rendering, which is why whenever I'm setting up the lights, I always make sure to turn on my resolution gate right here. It's underneath panels. It's this one right here. It's got the little blue circle and a white rectangle. And that puts a rectangle around my main window right here. And it is 960 by 540. It's really hard to see that, but it's right here. You can always change that by going to the clapperboard with the gear on it, the render settings. And if I scroll down, I can see width and height. I can change these. I've got a bunch of preset settings as well, but I can just type in numbers if I need to. So now I know where my camera's going to be looking at. I want to decide what I want for this, so maybe I'll put something like that. Doesn't really matter, I just want to have it set up, and I also want to make sure that if I move my camera again in the future, I don't lose the current camera position. And to do that, I find the easiest solution is to first select the camera. There's a button right here. If I mouse over, it says select camera. It's a little icon of an old-timey movie camera right underneath the word lighting. And I know I've got my camera selected because it highlights my rectangle, which is another good reason to have my resolution gate turned on. And next, I'm going to give this camera a single keyframe. I could lock it in place and just move around with a second camera to look at everything when I'm doing my lighting. But I like to make sure that I can always get back to this position. So with my camera selected, I can hit S on my keyboard. And that saves my current translate, rotate, and scale as a keyframe. And I can see it down here in my timeline. And what that means is if I move my camera somewhere else, anywhere else, and then down here in my timeline, if I just click and drag back to where it was, it jumps back to the only keyframe I currently have on that camera and brings me back to my original position. Now I don't have to worry about losing it. It's kind of like a bookmark for it. All right, next. A question I have always gotten from my students has been, out of all of these lights that are available to us, which ones are the key light, the fill light, and the backlight? Well, the simple truth is any one of them can be, except of course the ambient and volume, which I've mentioned in my last video, don't work anymore. Any of the others potentially serve that purpose. The sky dome light is one of my favorite go-tos for lighting the scene, because if the scene that it's based on is set up well enough with a bright light from the sun above and then ambient lighting from the scene around it, it basically takes care of the key light and the fill light all at the same time. And then it's just a matter of rotating my sky dome until it fits what I want for my scene. So we're going to skip that because that's a little too easy. Instead, let's grab a point light. And of course, it's not lighting anything right now. If I hit 7, I can see some light in my scene. But remember, if I go to Arnold Render, that is not actually enough light to light my scene. I have to go to my attribute editor, crank up my intensity. That's still not enough. Go to my Arnold, I'm going to crank up my exposure. And now I can actually see my scene. And I'm going to put this above my camera a little bit so I can see where the arrows are. And in front of it has to be in front of the object, otherwise it's going to be in shadow entirely. This could be, say, for indoors, this is just an incandescent light bulb above the entire scene. By the way, this jade sphere has subsurface scattering, which is why we're not going to get completely black shadows in here. I could always go into here and just to see what happens in my subsurface scattering, take that down a bit. And now we can get some darker shadows in here. Subsurface scattering just means that the light hits the surface and then bounces around inside of it and leaks out the other side, which is why it never turns completely black here. That turned down a bit. Now I've got some real shadows in here. Windows, outliner. There's my point light, and I like to name these. That's my key light. Now, what about the fill light, the secondary light? That needs to come from down below and pointing from the left towards the right, because my key light is up above and to the right, so it's going from about up and down to the left. This needs to come from the left up and to the right. So which light I'm going to use for that? Well, just for the fun of it, let's use the directional light. Once again, it doesn't really matter which lights you're using for this. And once again, also, the directional light doesn't care where it is in the scene. I'm just moving it over here so I can actually see it. And if I want to look like this is coming from down here and going up, I need to rotate this first towards my sphere and then upwards. But you may notice something. It's not actually lighting my sphere. It's being stopped by the plane underneath it. This plane is casting a shadow, so this is not doing me any good. There's an easy fix for that. I grab my plane. And let's see, under the shape node right here, render stats, I can turn off cast shadows. And now it's no longer casting shadows onto my sphere, so I can see it light up the sphere this way. And now I can go to my intensity. I can lower that down a bit. So again, I just want this to fill in some of the shadows a little bit. And we've used two from the old lights. Let's grab something from the new lights. Let's grab an area light. So let's move that around so I can see where it is. And this I want to just be lighting up the edge of my sphere. So I need to move this so it's just on the edge. Make sure it's pointing at it. Increase my intensity and my exposure. There, now I can really see it, but it's a bit bright. Rotate that around. So this is why I make sure to keyframe my camera so I can see how to get back to it really quick, because I keep having to move my camera around. Now, that might be a bit too much. And I think I'm going to light up a little bit from below. Or if I make my area light bigger, it gets dimmer because it's spreading that light over a broader area. So I might have to adjust my exposure a little bit. Dim that down a bit more. And now I've got 3-point lighting on this. If I want to, I can also say I don't want this highlight down here for my secondary fill light. I can turn off emit specular, and now it's just creating the light without creating the highlight on it, which sometimes is what I'm looking for. That makes it look more like it's just the environment lighting my sphere rather than a specific light bulb, or the sun coming from below the ground, which is kind of a weird effect. Once again, make sure these are all named. This is my fill light, my backlight. And once again, you can use the exposure to kind of fine tune your light. If I don't want to completely make it too dark, I can always use this to adjust a little bit afterwards. Now that's just quickly done, thrown together very, very fast. Not at all perfect, but I just want to demonstrate key light, fill light, backlight. While I'm here, might as well bring something else up, and you'll notice that the backlight right here is creating some weird effects on the ground. This weird light right here is because this area light is intersecting with the ground, and it only lights up in front of it, not behind it. So that's kind of an odd look. I don't really want that. So here's how I can fix something like that. I'm going to go to Windows, Relationship Editors, light linking. So the relationship is going editor, light linking, allows me to control the relationship between the light and the objects in my scene. And light linking is that specifically. And you see here light-centric versus object-centric. These both accomplish the same thing. It's just a matter of making things easier, depending on whether you start with the light over here. You can see these are all my lights. And you can say, well, this is my backlight right here. I'm going to turn off all the objects that I don't want to be affected by my backlight. Or I could go to my relationship editors, light linking, object centric. I can start with all my objects over here and turn off all the lights I don't want affecting them. I think in this case, relationship editors, light linking, light centric would be the most obvious one because I want to go to my backlight and say, I don't want this affecting the ground. I don't even want this affecting the sphere or the cylinder. I only want this to be affecting my jade sphere right here. And that gets rid of this weird effect on the ground where this light was lighting it where I didn't want it to be. You can't really do this in real life. This is one of those great advantages of using 3D. You can have complete control of each and every one of your lights and how they work. Reality doesn't give you that. And there we go. So that is the basic concept behind 3-point lighting.